So this review's kind of been a long time coming, unless you're watching this for the first time in the GBA compilation and you have no idea what I'm talking about. 5 years ago, I looked at Sonic Advance 1, and to summarize my feelings, I seriously love that game. It's easily my second favorite of the Advance trilogy, right behind Advance 3, and I could honestly just go back to play it again and again. Sonic Advance 2, however, yeah. This game and I have a pretty interesting history. The first time I got to play it was on an emulator around a decade ago when I tried recording a playthrough of it for my old Let's Play channel, Cooper Plays Games. But I only got about 4 zones in until I decided to stop playing. Those Let's Play videos no longer exist, by the way, so I wouldn't recommend trying to find them. That was my first real experience with Sonic Advance 2, and I think that Let's Play attempt was my first time playing any of the Advance games, unless me playing Advance 3 on a modded PSP predates it somehow. There wasn't too much development info I could find about Advance 2, which is pretty in line for the other GBA games as well. It was developed once again by Dimps and apparently started production immediately after the completion of Advance 1, beginning in February of 2002, meaning development only lasted about 8 months. Advance 2 was first revealed at the Tokyo Toy Show in 2002, and an early trailer for the game would be featured in Sonic Mega Collection, which was released in November 2002, just 1 month before Advance 2. This early trailer would feature a few beta elements left over in the game, like an early title screen, slightly different character sprites, and even some older level layouts. There's also an early screenshot that was featured on the official Sonic the Hedgehog website back in the day, featuring the 4 main playable characters, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Cream. But in the screenshot, you can see the life icon is a miscolored Amy, which is kind of funny. And that's basically all the early development info I have for the game. Sonic Advance 2 would first be released in Japan on December 19th, 2002. Yep, just 1 year after Advance 1. So they made this game fast. And Advance 2 would also be released in other regions in March 2003. Before I just jump into the game, I did want to talk about how, while I did grow up with a Game Boy Advance SP, I never had the chance to play any of the Advance games or even Battle. However, I do have some minor nostalgia for certain aspects of Advance 2, mainly the graphics and music, thanks to an old fan game known as Ultimate Flash Sonic. Yeah, I probably just dug up an old memory for a lot of you that were watching, but this Flash game was pretty fun, even though it's really short. It only has 2 zones with 2 acts and a boss fight each, so that's only like 4 levels. It was first released around February 2004, just a few months before Advance 3 came out. And yes, that means this Flash game is 20 years old, which really shows in a lot of areas, but it's still a neat little thing from my childhood that I like bringing up. I remember this game running slow as hell on my old computer way back when, so it's weird to me seeing it run so fluently. Even though it's just 4 levels, there's still some pretty fun things you can unlock, like 2 extra characters, Shadow and Amy, and it even had its own cheat codes and password system. By the way, this code unlocks everything. You're welcome. I guess if I could offer more of a proper analysis, for a fan game in 2004, the level design is pretty on par with Advance 2, which is both good and bad, but it's not horrible, for a fan game. Actually, the level designs here are pretty ahead of their time when it comes to predicting how modern day Dimps would go on to make future games, like placing dash pads at any part of the level like before you run up a loop, and even finding them on the walls and ramps that you're running on. Seriously, why are those there? This can be excused because clearly a young fan made this game and wasn't really a master at level design. So what exactly were the adults who made Sonic 4 Episode 1 and 2's excuse? This Flash game even ends by proclaiming, "Sonic Team rules! Now go and buy Sonic Advance 2, the best game ever!" Really? The best game ever? Well, thank you Dennis for the recommendation. Let's finally have a look at Sonic Advance 2. The story of Advance 2 is just as basic as before. Dr. Eggman returns and is up to no good again, so Sonic has to go stop him. While on this adventure, Sonic ends up needing to rescue Tails and new character Cream the Rabbit. Nothing too out of the ordinary happens, apart from one boss encounter later which, at first, you can see is being operated by Knuckles instead of Eggman. Wait, what? Yeah, Eggman apparently tricked Knuckles into fighting Sonic again. It's kinda funny, but the encounter only lasts just one boss fight and cutscene. Literally nothing nothing else comes from this. Well, Sonic and the gang eventually catch up with Eggman in space, again, and defeat this giant robot he built. The game's normal ending shows whichever character you're playing as falling all the way down from space, as Eggman's base collapses from the sky above them. However, just like the other 2D games, this is not the true ending. After getting all 7 Chaos Emeralds, Sonic is treated to the true ending. Cream's mother, Vanilla, also in her series debut, gets kidnapped by another device that Eggman built, and it takes her up to outer space. So Sonic goes super and heads to space to defeat Eggman's contraption, and rescues Vanilla in the process. Once again surviving falling all the way down from space, but whatever. And that's it. That's the basic gist of Advance 2's story. Apart from that brief encounter with Knuckles, there isn't too much really going on here apart from Eggman just being up to his old schemes. Again. The biggest additions to Advance 2 are easily Cream the Rabbit and her mother Vanilla. Cream is one of my favorite characters in the series. She's a great counterpart to Tails, and she's even traveling around with her own child companion, Cheese. Get it? Cream and Cheese. Cream the Rabbit was originally made for Sonic Heroes, but the developers decided to put her in Advance 2. I guess that way so the game could have a new playable character. She would go on to appear in future games, even though recently she's made less and less appearances in some of the more major titles, apart from the Olympic Games series, which is now dead. Uh-oh. While I would consider Cream an underused character nowadays, Vanilla is far worse in comparison to her daughter. Like, Cream at least got to appear in the other games, including 3D ones. Vanilla would only ever appear in Advance 2 and 3, appeared for a few dialogue boxes in Sonic Rush, had a decent sized role in the Sonic X anime, and that's it. She has yet to appear again in any of the games, and it's a damn shame. I'm thankful the comics still use her, but I'm sad the games themselves just don't feature her at all. Though I will say, I do like that Vanilla makes an appearance in Cream's ending cutscene. It's cute. But overall, Sonic Advance 2's story is incredibly basic, most likely due to the game's tight development schedule. It's still alright for what it does, and the inclusion of Cream, Cheese, and Vanilla is really sweet, so I'm hard pressed to point out anything wrong with the game's plot or characters, unless I'm missing something. Wait a minute, where the hell is Amy? Let's get to the gameplay. For the most part, this game plays pretty similar to Advance 1, mainly since it was built off the same engine. You start out as Sonic and eventually unlock the rest of the characters as the game goes on. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles basically play the exact same, with some minor tweaks. So all of them can spin dash, Sonic has his Insta-Shield, Tails can fly, and Knuckles can glide and punch. Sonic also seems to have a new homing attack move, similar to the 3D games, but it's a little weird to figure out. I never really saw much use for it because jumping on enemies works just fine. The biggest addition to this game is obviously Cream the Rabbit, who can play pretty similar to Tails, in the sense that she can also fly by using her ears. However, Cream is also being followed by Cheese at all times, which means if you press the B button, Cream can send Cheese to attack any nearby enemy and boss in order to kill/harm them. Oh yes, Cream and Cheese are easily the most broken characters in the game, and they could really make it a total cakewalk to play. While Tails is who I'd usually consider the easy mode for these games, Cream and Cheese are basically a super easy mode. Like, seriously, you can completely decimate boss fights using Cheese. It is a horrendously broken move, but I honestly love it. Fun fact, in Sonic Heroes, Cream and Cheese still had this ability, but you rarely, if not never, get to use it. Since Cream was the flying type, she's always carrying the other two characters, so you'll most likely have to just install a mod that lets you play as the flying characters on their own, just so you can use the Cheese attack in Heroes. I love the way Cream plays on her own. It's pretty solid 3D gameplay for her, apart from the missing spin dash. She seriously has so much potential to be a lot of fun to play as in 3D, and I really hope she becomes playable again in a future game. But getting back to Advance 2, one new feature for every character that's actually a pretty cool concept is that if you run fast for long enough, you can activate this boost mode of sorts. It can make you move a lot faster with an afterimage following you. Visually it looks cool, and conceptually, it's an interesting idea, but I don't think Advance 2 really executed it well. This isn't really because the mode itself is awful, but more, the rest of the game doesn't really help it seem special. Yeah, we seem to have already arrived at this topic, but my personal biggest gripe with Sonic Advance 2 is actually a pretty crucial part of the entire game, the level design. Something you may have noticed with Advance 2 just from watching the gameplay is that speed is a huge focus. I know, no shit, it's a Sonic game, but I think Advance 2 really leans in on this the most in comparison to the other Advance games. This might be the fastest Sonic has ever been on a handheld game, until the Rush games I guess. The speed really is impressive for the GBA to pull off at that time, and I heard that a working title for the game was apparently Sea Sonic Sonic run. Unfortunately, this constant great burst of speed results in the sacrifice of interesting level design. Every single level in Advance 2 is designed almost the exact same. Some of the later zones do try changing things up, for the worst, but a lot of the earlier stages feel very samey. My ideal level design for Sonic isn't just about going super fast all the time, but also including a bunch of different routes and allowing the player to explore the environments in order to maybe find better pathways or even bonus stuff like ring boxes and whatnot. Advance 2 doesn't really do this that often, and at points it often feels like I'm playing a prequel to Sonic 4 Episode 2. This game really holds true to that old hold right to win stereotype that most 2D Sonic games got back then, and seeing how this is a lot of people's favorite game in the Advance trilogy, I feel like that also kind of damaged the reputation for the other 2D Sonic games, even the classic ones. All the levels being constantly similarly designed can be pretty disappointing for fans like me who don't want to just go fast all the time. It especially doesn't help when the acts are too short, and nothing really sticks with me as a result. For me, I've always felt that speed is supposed to be a reward, not something that's constantly given to you like candy. Because most of Advance 2's levels have you running fast all the time, it kind of makes the boost mode feel less special to use when you get it because you're already almost always running super fast. So who really gives a shit when you slightly run faster for a few seconds? And a lot of you are gonna hate hearing me say this, and I'm gonna mention this a few times in the review, but I think Advance 3 handled this aspect way better, as much as Advance 2 fans may hate that game's level design. One of the more annoying gimmicks for me were the grind rails, which did appear in Advance 1 a few times, but only Sonic and Amy were able to use them. Advance 2 not only brings back the grind rails, but lets every character be able to use them. That's the good part. The bad part is that every level kind of overuses them. Like, I get it, they were a cool thing in Sonic Adventure 2, and putting them in the 2D games was a pretty good idea, but the way they're used in Advance 2 is really not too great. Not only are they a bit overused, but mechanically they just don't work very well. You can only hop on them from a flat surface, then you can slide on them just fine. But if you try jumping at them from any other angle, including a slanted one, you're not gonna land on them, you just phase through. Not only can this make the grind rails seem like they just don't want to work sometimes, but it could also lead to you straight up dying when a grind rail easily could have saved you. Something is horribly wrong when I feel like the grind rails in Ultimate Flash Sonic function better. Plus, Advance 3 would go on to improve the grind rails in terms of level placement and how they functioned. God, I love Advance 3. I'd rather be playing that. Moving on, there's one other problem with this game's levels, and it really becomes apparent in the later half of the game. The first 4 zones, while feeling repetitive, are fine enough on their own, but the moment you hit Sky Canyon, this game really goes downhill. Literally, into a bottomless pit. The issue not only lies with how just bad the level layouts can be, but Sky Canyon is one of those levels where bottomless pits are a huge issue for the game. Bottomless pits are a pretty common complaint for dimp Sonic games, and I feel like Sonic Advance 2 was the first time they really became a huge issue. They were there in Advance 1, but it was only on a few occasions and only in some of the later levels, so they weren't overused, especially not in comparison to how Advance 2 just loves them. Advance 2's bottomless pits aren't just annoying because they can be so frequent, but a different issue is that the game has another special move that the characters can use, which it also kind of fails at explaining to the player, unless they read the manual or check the game's options menu. Advance 2 introduced a new trick move. When you launch off a ramp or most springs, pressing R in a certain direction on the D-pad can make your character do a special move in the air. This could include dashing forward or launching yourself up to a higher section. The trick move is an insanely cool idea, and I'm glad Advance 2 introduced it, but it did not execute it well at all. For the most part, while you can use the trick moves in the first 4 zones, they're not really required to beat the levels. That is not the case for the last 3 zones. Sky Canyon has become a pretty infamous zone for fans because it has some pretty irritating sections where, if you don't use the move, you will fall straight to your death. Again, the game never tells you how to use the move or that it's required for the later levels, so you'll very likely get blindsided by this and keep dying in Sky Canyon without understanding how you're supposed to even beat the damn level. I cannot believe how badly Advance 2 fumbled this really good idea, which again, Advance 3 utilized way better, and this legitimately makes the game lose so many points for me. So if you don't know how to use this trick move in some of the later levels, then you are absolutely going to die. Trying to balance out this review by talking about things I do like, the graphics and art style are incredible. Advance 1 already looked terrific, but Advance 2 does a really great job expanding on this style. Every level can be vibrant and colorful, and while I personally don't just like plowing through every single one of with them super fast all the time, the huge bursts of colors and scenery quickly moving past you can be very mesmerizing to watch. No slowdown issues either, which is very impressive for the GBA in 2002. I'll always have a soft spot for that late 90s, early 2000s Yuji Yukawa-san style, so I'm glad Advance 2 was made in this era because the graphics really benefit from it. The soundtrack is probably the best part of the game for me. Every level has catchy and memorable music, and much like the gameplay itself, the tracks are very fast paced. My favorite track is easily Hot Crater Act 1. Not too big on this level, in fact it's probably the first one where some of the worst ideas in this game start being introduced, but the music is fantastic and really thrilling to run around listening to. Plus, one kinda cool idea that Advance 2 included were these pinch phases for the boss music, which can make the battles feel more fast-paced and intense, even though I'm not super huge on the boss fights themselves. Looking at the zones themselves, I personally don't have too much to say about them because I just think they're all way too similar to each other. But starting with Leaf Forest, it's an okay standard first level, but it's pretty bland in terms of level design. Probably the most plain out of every zone. Seriously, you can mostly just hold right to win here and you'll be fine. Leaf Forest doesn't lose as many points as the others since it is the first, and the music is pretty spectacular. It's a fantastic track that really sets up how energetic and fun the rest of the game's music is gonna be, and it would even be brought back and partially remixed for Sonic Generations, which is pretty cool. The only other noteworthy thing about Leaf Forest is that you can unlock Cream after you finish it, which leads into the second zone, Hot Crater. This level is fine. Apart from having my favorite music track in the game, the level design here is mostly plain and forgettable again. There were these poles you can run past and spin on to gain even more speed. Maybe some of the hook things that launch you up are kinda cool, but that's pretty much all I can recall about what was unique about this level. Though Hot Shelter is where the bottomless pits really start popping up more. They are legitimately terrible and are sadly gonna keep getting worse as the game goes on. But things do kinda look up a bit with Zone 3, Music Plant. This zone is a huge fan favorite and it's easy to see why. There are some legitimately fun music-themed gimmicks here, like bouncing on piano keys, getting launched out of these trumpets, and a bunch of other instrument-based enemies and designs. And of course, the music here is fantastic as well. I would probably call Music Plant the most fun level in the game and probably the one zone I wouldn't mind replaying. You also unlock Tails here too, which is cool. And when it comes to Zone 4, Ice Paradise, it almost reaches that same level of fun in Music Plant, but for the most part, this level just kinda goes back to being fine, like the first two zones. I do love the snow aesthetic, and Act 1 has a fun Christmassy sounding music track, but again, you're mostly just holding right and jumping. Occasional loop-de-loop, having a spring or dash pad send you down the path the game wants you to go, just not too much going on. This level also feels weirdly closed in and claustrophobic for me to play. I don't really know how to describe it, but I don't think the linear structure here really benefits the level at all. It's supposed to be a snow level. Why not make it seem a bit more open than it is? I do love the penguin batniks though. They are insanely cute. Despite my issues, Ice Paradise is probably the last zone in the game I kind of enjoy. Because Zone 5 is, aw shit, Sky Canyon. Yep, we're at the zone where the game decides to just stop being fun. Every issue I've had with the previous zones is present, but made way worse with Sky Canyon's level design straight up killing you if you don't know how to use the trick move. I'm sorry, but this level's not fun to play. When it's not boring, it's just irritating. Good graphics and music can't redeem any of this crap. What doesn't help either is that this level can seriously drag, which is crazy because it's still featuring sections where you're most certainly moving fast, but that doesn't automatically mean you'll reach the end any faster either. How did they make levels that are supposed to be designed around moving super fast feel like they're taking forever? That's honestly impressive. Whatever, moving on to Zone 6, Techno Base, it doesn't really improve things. It does continue to include sections where you can die if you fail to use the trick move, but at the very least, if you made it this far, then you're now at least aware that the move exists, and can clue in better where you should probably use it. That still doesn't fix things, but at least the game's not killing you out of nowhere anymore. Another thing about this level, which you can probably notice just by looking at it, are all the crazy and colorful backgrounds. It still looks vibrant and impressive for the GBA to pull off, but I don't know, it could be a little too much to look at if you've maybe been stuck in the level for too long. I love the technological themes for this level, but Technobase is still just kinda plain for me again. So Cybertrack this ain't. It's also another level that drags on a bit too long, and so does the next zone, Egg Utopia, the final regular zone with 2 acts, and fuck this shit. This zone has it all. Colorful graphics and great music, but bland level design that lasts way too long, a dozen grind rails that don't work very well, bottomless pits aplenty, and it just goes on and on and on. I'm not kidding when I say this. This is one of the most boring fucking final levels I've ever played in a Sonic game. It makes Scrap Brain look like Final Egg. I'd rather play Death Egg Mark II from Sonic 4, which debatably had just as bland, if not worse level design, but at least that zone was shorter. Fuck Egg Utopia, what a terrible final level. Before I get to the actual final zone, I'll segue right into the boss fights, and they're all kinda bad. And yet another example of a cool concept being poorly executed, which appears to be Advance 2's motto. Pretty much every single boss fight involves you constantly running and trying to jump at Eggman. Yep, just like the levels, all the boss fights can feel like you're playing the same shit over and over again. It can get really tedious, and losing in these boss fights is never fun, because then you have to replay a zone again. And I just don't like replaying the levels or boss fights, so it's like a double punishment for me. The only boss fight that kinda stuck out to me was the one in Sky Canyon, not because it's any good, because it's not, but when you're playing through the game as Sonic for the first time, Knuckles is the one you're fighting. So that boss fight is more interesting from a story perspective, but not so much gameplay. Really, the only times I enjoyed playing these boss fights was when I was Cream and Cheese, because Cheese can really eviscerate these bosses in seconds. And this carries over into the final zone, by the way, XX Zone, or Double X Zone, X2 Zone, because for some reason the start of this level involves a boss rush. This is the only advanced game that features a boss rush, and it's easy to see why. It's not fun, and it takes forever. At the very least, they do lower the hits on the previous bosses, but it's still not fun. The final boss itself is kinda average, which I guess means it's probably the best one. You just have to avoid being crushed by platforms coming out the ground, and just try to land a few hits on the giant robot, while also avoiding it shooting projectiles at you. In other words, just play as Cream and send Cheese at him over and over. You'll always win. Obviously, this isn't the true final boss, and the only way to get to the actual one is by going after the Chaos Emeralds. You did have to do the same thing in the previous games, so it should be a piece of cake, right? Getting to the special stages in Sonic Advance 2 is one of the worst aspects of the game. Yes, even worse than killing the player in levels for not knowing the trick move. In every level, you can find these special rings to pick up, with each act having 7. And in order to access the special stages, then you have to collect all 7 special rings and then finish the level. A game where just about every level is designed around moving really fast and being as linear as possible, also expects you to wander around these stretched out locations in order to find these stupid rings. These levels are boring to run in and can be a huge drag to just stop and look around in too. And a lot of these special rings can be placed in really specific locations, so a guide is basically required to find them all. I'm noticing a conflict of interest. Do they want the levels to be sped through super fast? Or do they want weirdos like me to stop and look around like better games with better level layouts did better in the past? You can't just have your cake and eat it too, Advance 2! You fucked up! Not to mention, if you get all the special rings but lose the special stage, you have to go recollect all 7 rings again, just so you can get another chance at playing the special stages. That is so fucking tedious. Now, some of you watching might mention, well, what about collecting the Chow in Advance 3? Those could be just as obnoxious and cryptically hidden like the special rings in Advance 2. Well, Advance 3 benefits from 2 things. 1, better level design that actually lets you explore, and 2, when you pick up a Chow, you don't have to recollect them, and the game autosaves your progress. And I don't care who you are, that is a million times better. Advance 3 is better than Advance 2, deal with it. But when it comes to the special stages in Advance 2, especially after you understand how to play them, they're pretty lame. It has you running around in a, albeit pretty impressive 3D space, where you have to collect 300 rings. Oh yeah, the Zero Robot from Adventure 1's also here. That's cool. 300 rings is a lot, but you can often build up bonuses by collecting a lot of rings in great succession. But I think one issue I really have with these special stages are the controls. It just feels like ass. Needing to almost always hold forward all the time makes these special stages not very fun to play at all. Not like the special stages have been major highlights before, but I just found these kinda dull to play. And needing to do them over and over again didn't help matters either. It gets even worse later, trust me. So after you go through the annoying scavenger hunts of collecting every special ring, and play through the tedium of all 7 special stages, that means Sonic can access the final zone in the game. The true final boss takes place in True Area 53, the only part of the game where you can play as Super Sonic, and it's alright. It's another standard final boss in space kind of fight. You just have to knock Eggman's missiles back at him to damage him, while also keeping track of your ring count. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say about this fight. It's probably the second best one, you know, behind the final boss in the Double X zone, but that's really it. And again, this is the only part of the game where you can play as Super Sonic, meaning you can't play as him in regular levels, but considering the time period this came out in, what else is new? Just beat the fight, save vanilla, and the game is over. So, what else does this game have when it comes to extra content? Well, this is actually another one of the worst handled aspects of the game. Not in terms of what the actual content is, but more how you go about unlocking everything. You may have noticed that there was something or more someone that was missing from Advance 2, and this is the part of the review where I once again need to ask, where is Amy? She was playable from the start in Advance 1, and you unlock her in Advance 3 pretty early on. So when you do finish the game, why doesn't she appear and why isn't she selectable anywhere? Well, she is still in the game and can be unlocked, but it's not from playing the story mode or even by getting the true ending. In order to unlock Amy, you have to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds with every single character. Yeah, they don't share the emeralds between each other. So you gotta go collect all the special rings and play through all the special stages 4 times just to play as Amy. Why the hell did they do this? How do you mess up getting an unlockable character this badly? And a character that you can select and play as just fine in the previous game. And do you know how ungoddamn fair it is that the characters no longer share the emeralds between each other? What if you weren't trying to unlock Amy and you were just trying to get to the true ending? So you maybe decide to collect the special rings as Tails or Cream, since they both fly and can make exploring the levels a lot easier, only to discover you didn't even unlock the true final boss. This means you have to collect all the emeralds as Sonic just to get the final level. You can't use any other character to help you get there anymore. Needless to say, I did not want to go through the hassle of collecting every Chaos Emerald 4 times. I don't like Advance 2, and I don't care about it enough to do that. So I got a Codebreaker GBA device, and used cheats to unlock Amy and the final boss just to record footage. Fans of this game can give me shit for that, but Advance 2 shouldn't have handled these basic unlockables so horribly. Also, it was either I do this or no review. When it comes to Amy herself, she plays just fine. She's mostly a Sonic clone in this game, which can be both good and bad for some people, but overall, she should not have been locked behind this game in such a stupid fashion. As much as I love getting to play as Amy again, she is not worth the hassle of getting every Chaos Emerald multiple times just to play as her. That's dumb. This game is dumb. If you like this game, you are not dumb, but this game is still dumb. In terms of the other extra content, guess what, fucko? You can only unlock them by collecting the damn Chaos Emeralds! Suffice to say, if you were able to unlock Amy, you'll have everything. The tiny Chow Garden from Advance 1 returns, and it's about as okay as it was there, but you're only able to unlock it by collecting the Chaos Emeralds with at least 1 character. Really smart idea by making us have to unlock a basic extra that was easily accessible in the previous game. There's also the sound test, which now features Cream dancing along to the music, which is really cute. What's not cute is that you can't unlock the sound test unless you collect every Chaos Emerald with 2 characters. Cool. There's even a boss option / time attack mode, which is fine I guess if you maybe enjoyed the boss fights or whatever. But guess what? You can't even access this mode either unless you collect all the Chaos Emeralds with 3 characters! What is wrong with this game? Actually, the only mode that isn't locked behind these really stupid methods is, unsurprisingly, the multiplayer mode, which you can play with a single game pack, or via the link cable if you and a friend have your own copies of the game. I've never got a chance to play the multiplayer modes in the Advance games, but this one seems pretty similar to Advance 1's multiplayer mode, so I guess if you enjoyed playing it there, then it shouldn't be too bad here either. In conclusion, I don't like Advance 2. There's a reason I didn't want to tackle it 5 years ago. The graphics are terrific and the music is fantastic. I also love Cream and Vanilla, but Sonic Advance 2 is quite possibly one of my least favorite Sonic games to go back and play. The level designs are way too samey for me, with the last 3 zones just legitimately not being very good. I do love the new boost and trick modes, but the game executes them horribly, and straight up punishes the player if they don't know about the latter. I hate the special rings, the special stages are boring, and making most of the extra content, including Amy, locked behind needing to collect the Chaos Emeralds over and over again is not fun. Honestly, while none of the GBA games, apart from maybe Advance 3, didn't really have huge development cycles, I would say Advance 2 probably suffers the most from a lack of polish. Advance 1 did have a short development time, but it was almost graceful in comparison to how solid the game came out. I greatly prefer replaying Advance 1 anytime, but Advance 2, despite its faster paced levels, just had a lot of lackluster execution. Say what you will about Advance 3, that game absolutely improved several terrible aspects from Advance 2, and I adore it so much. I just really wish I could say the same about Advance 2. With that said, I do understand my disliking of Advance 2 obviously comes down to preference. There are plenty of Sonic fans out there, and most likely in the comments, who adore this game and consider it their favorite of the trilogy. I do kind of understand the idea of fans finding this game more thrilling and entertaining than Advance 1, and I also think this game's sense of speed and simplicity is probably what makes those fans hate the more experimental approach of Advance 3. Honestly, fans having differing viewpoints on which game in the trilogy they prefer just really makes me love how varied the Advance games can truly feel. Not all of them feel the exact same as one another apart from maybe graphics and music, and that's really cool. So while I may not like Advance 2 very much and consider it the worst in the trilogy, there are other people who think otherwise and really like this game. And hey, that's okay. Advance 2 is still dumb though. Regardless of my feelings on the game, if you want to go out and play Advance 2, the best option you have right now is just finding the original cartridge and playing it on your GBA, or backwards compatible DS, or emulation. Advance 2 did see a port on the Wii U Virtual Console in February 2016, but it was only in Japan and it got delisted recently, just like every other game on the Wii U eShop. So have fun modding! I've probably said this in every Sonic GBA video I've ever made so far, but man, I really hope we see the Advance Trilogy and Battle get ported at some point. Now that Nintendo has that GBA app on Switch, I really hope Sega decides to put these classic handheld titles on the service. It would be so much fun getting to play these games on a portable console again, along with playing the multiplayer modes online with friends. That would be so cool. If that doesn't happen, then I hope Sega at least includes the games on another Sonic game collection. Maybe it could be done in a similar vein to Gems collection, where it includes all these obscure titles in the series like the Advance games and Battle. It would be easy money for them, but they have yet to do this. Seriously, if Castlevania can do an Advance collection, why can't Sonic? What's the holdup? I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Feels nice making a shorter video nowadays, and sorry again that this review took 5 years to finally happen, but I hope you guys enjoyed the review. And if you're watching this in a GBA compilation video, then I hope you enjoy the rest of the reviews too, even though some of them were made a few years apart. Like the Advance 1 and 3 reviews were made back in 2019 before the GBA app on Switch even existed, and also before COVID. I guess I'll stop now before I have a crisis, but thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next review. Take care and good night.